Hey everyone, welcome to the Knowledge Commons. My name is Andrew Padilla. I spend my time in open data systems engineering with a focus in the area of open water data. Jessica, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name's Jessica Talisman. It still says I'm a senior information architect, and I am. I work at the intersections of culture and technology, and building knowledge infrastructures for organizations, both public and private. Lynda, thanks for coming on the podcast today. Excuse me. Um, Knowledge Commons podcast was really founded out of a principle of wanting to tackle some issues and help to inform and create a common space for talking about things that are all data commons and knowledge commons. And we look towards experts like you, people working in this space. So thank you for coming on. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having.
Yeah. So just diving in, for our listeners, data commons, knowledge commons moves into sort of the public data space. And part of what we are interested in is really understanding where the knowledge commons and data commons contributes to the greater good. Can you tell us a little bit about your current role, who you are, and your position where you work?
Sure, yeah. So I'm at Penn Libraries, the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. I work as the Snyder Grenadier Director of Research Data and Digital Scholarship, which means that I manage a team of data librarians, digital humanists, technologists, GIS librarians, data management specialists, who work in those variety of areas that throughout the research life cycle, and especially the digital research life cycle. So we can help people plan their data and plan their projects all the way to actually even help them publish or create new projects. So it's a great team, and it's really exciting to be working with them.
That's good.
And so I've been a data librarian since 2007, so a very long time. So it's being able to work with a team like that is really fulfilling.
And as a librarian, I think what's really interesting, it's not too uncommon, especially in academic librarianship, that you also bring a certain lens and expertise. So aside from the Data Rescue Project, which we're going to talk more about, your journey as a librarian brought you through. I saw that you have a PhD in American history, and you have a certain like subject matter expertise and domain expertise. Can you tell us a little bit about your role as a librarian, more
Yeah,
specific?
sure. So I my background's in political science originally, and that was how I ended up coming into data librarianship. Was just um, at the time I started, there weren't a lot of librarians who came out of library school with the skill sets to be able to help people with data, and I happened to be one of those. And so that political science background, the social science background, has really been helpful throughout my career. And then recently, in a couple of years ago, finished my PhD in history, which was more of a labor of love, but there was also a data element with that. I was working to create networking data sets for a group of activists that I was really interested in. My research is looking at how activists go from one movement to another over time. And so I'm seeing that playing out in my real life with the Data Rescue Project. So it's been really helpful. And I think that background informs the way I can work with researchers who are doing the same kind of digital humanities or digital scholarship projects, or who are managing data. It really helps me understand, as a librarian, kind of where the researchers who are coming to us are and what they need.
Yeah, so Lynda, I think many of us who are involved in open data know you through the New Yorker article in which you were interviewed.
Mhm.
Can you share the origin story of the Data Rescue Project?
Sure. So the group, we have to go back a little bit to 2017, and in 2017 there was a response to the first Trump administration's assumptions that the first Trump administration would take down environmental or climate data. And that group was called Data Refuge, and they helped to encourage data rescue events, respond to data rescue events around the country. And it, it, uh, it was very focused, I think, on environmental data. There was some other kinds of data that got in there that people were worried about, but for the most part, it was smaller scale in terms of that kind of scope. In February, January, February, we were, when I say we, several of the data librarians involved with the data rescue project were very concerned about the kind of the speed and scale at which data was being targeted for either takedown or modifications, as well as the scope of the dismantling of offices and agencies. And so we got together as a group and we're having a conversation. First off, like, how do we just respond and help to our patrons? You know, we have patrons emailing us, we have patrons getting in touch with us about where does CDC data go? How do we help them with that? And that led to the creation of a Google Doc. And that was really the first start with Data Rescue Project, was that Google Doc. Um, and I call it librarian viral. I've never seen a Google Doc spread so widely across the internet.
And Lynda, for our
Uh-huh.
listeners, just because they may not be as familiar with librarians and library science,
Yeah,
patrons are our users. And that's what's really important.
patrons, yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, yeah. So our patrons are our clients, our
Yeah.
users, however you want to describe. We call them patrons most of the time, not customers, but patrons. So we wanted to help our user communities, the people that we serve as librarians or work with as librarians, and that initial Google Doc and the initial discussions, we got together and we wanted to do a little bit more than just point people to the pre-existing resources, which is what we were trying to do. Just point people to IA, point people point people to Internet Archive, or point people to the end of term web archive, which has been going on for a long time. We wanted to do a little bit more than just do that. So we decided to create the Data Rescue Project as a way to uh, one, really focus on social data that we didn't see other groups doing. So there are groups out there, I can talk about them later, but the Environmental Data and Governance Initiative, there's the Public Environmental Data Partners. They've been around since 2017 and they've been rescuing environmental data, and they do a great job with environmental data. So we wanted to try to complement the work that we knew that they were doing. And so because of that, we decided to focus on social science or social data that we didn't see being a focus of data rescues publicly. Like, we just didn't know if that anybody else was doing that. And that the initial group agency that we worked on was the Department of Education. It's a department that many of us are from universities, so we see that as an important department for us. And so the first rescue was that, and the Institute for Museum and Library Services, which is the IMLS, which is also a key agency for librarians. So that was really the origin. It was just an attempt to try and go for the data that we needed to have for ourselves. You know, it was kind of a little bit of a, not a selfish thing, but it was very focused on what we needed for our own work and our own communities. And then the other part of that was helping to coordinate or to figure out who was doing what, because a lot of the data sets were like, people were taking CDC data but putting it on their personal website, or we knew that maybe a nonprofit was rescuing its own data, but the data it cared about, but they weren't making it public. So we wanted to make sure that we were trying to bring people together across the different organizations, and that we were all talking to each other. So that was still a big part of our mission, is just to reach out and talk to groups that are interested in this, that are doing their own rescues, or just interested in the federal statistical system in any kind of way. And so it's been a lot of meetings talking across those communities since February, And I think that that part of it is a little bit different from last time. There was some conversations, but I think we've played a big role of trying to encourage that conversations across the different conversations across organizations.
And you mentioned workflow. And so your role as a founding member, we were talking a little bit before the show about the challenges, but primarily your role has amounted to a lot of figuring out the workflow and infrastructure.
Mhm.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so we have a steering committee that has worked together, and there's about 8 of us on the steering committee who's worked to try to figure out how are we going to do asynchronous data rescues. So last time, a lot of the data rescues were based on events, and we knew we didn't have time to organize events and get catering, and those kinds of things. So we really wanted to try and focus in on how to create an asynchronous system. And so that for myself, excuse me, I helped to create that infrastructure, and then over time, the support for that infrastructure, the roles have evolved within the group. So different people have taken on different roles within that. But the good thing one of the things that was really helpful for us is that one of our steering committee members came from Sucho, which is Saving Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online. It's a really, it was the organization that kicked off in 2022 with the start of the war in Ukraine to try and save the cultural heritage of the Ukraine. And he came into our group. Sebastian came into our group and was able to give us advice on how to set up our infrastructure. Um, you know, None of us had ever done this before, and so it was really helpful to have his ideas, as well as borrowing from our own knowledge of data curation techniques to be able to create an infrastructure that is workable. And in that first week, one of our using that spreadsheet, all of the kind of thing, the workflows that we set up within that first week, I think about 50 data sets were rescued, and many of them by 2 people in the group, it was just fantastic to see that. But yeah, so that infrastructure, it was, you know, our steering committee, but it was also borrowing on all the different groups that we work with to create that.
And so based on the dynamics of those various groups, how is that molded or the core mission of DRP today?
Yeah, I think the one of the things that we really are interested in for the longer term is thinking about rapid response rescues for digital objects. So there is, I think, a need to think more broadly than the United States when it comes to this question of rapid response, and how we do this when it comes to digital objects. Um, what we would like to leave behind in the data rescue project is our best practices for groups going forward, as well as infrastructure for groups going forward, if in the United States or elsewhere, who feel like they need to do some kind of digital object rescue, and potentially right now that for us might just be the best practices and the workflows, and setting that up so that people can use it in the future, but also even maybe an infrastructure model that could be used, and even providing them storage that they could get started with, or websites that they could get started with, that kind of thing. That's more the longer range view. But I do think having our mission right now is to make sure that that we, while there is a need to respond to what is happening in the US now, that this is a bigger problem that we need to think about globally, that we need to think about in terms of digital preservation, digital objects globally, and not just in relation to what the US needs.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And it speaks to sort of the foundations, not to harp too much, but there's some principles in library science and in librarianship that, seek to connect knowledge more broadly,
Mhm.
than just being myopic and solely it's siloed, I would say.
Yeah.
What does the steering committee look like, and what roles do the individual members play?
Yeah, our steering committee consists of, like I said, it's 8 people. We have people from the core groups that when it started. So when we started up, it was a kind of a coalition of 3 organizations. iAssist, which I'm not going to try to say that name because I don't always remember it. But iAssist is an international data professionals organization, and I'm the secretary of that. RDAP, which is a more focused on data management, and it tends to be U.S. and Canadian members primarily. And then Data Curation Network, which is a consortia of data repositories at universities that work together to do shared data curation techniques and expertise. So those that we have overlapping memberships, and so I'm a member of all 3 of those groups, and others are maybe member of 1 or 2 of them. So we know that our members are we're really concerned about what was happening in February, in January and February. And so we were coming together to respond to that. So a lot of the steering committee are those original people from those 3 groups. We also have a representative from the Research Data Alliance, which is a global group, Sucho, as I mentioned. And within our group, we don't have a, we try to keep it relatively democratic in terms, or we try to keep it very democratic in terms of how we make decisions, and then the structure. But there's some of us who are able to speak to the media, who have permission from our employers to speak to the media, or to speak or feel comfortable speaking in a more public way. We have others who work with we have a volunteer coordinator. We have a person who's doing I do a lot of the social media, but we have another person who does a lot of that as well. We have a person, Kathleen Burlingame from Data and Society, who is a metadata expert. And so she's really helped us with the data rescue project portal, and working with the metadata within that. And her and another person have been central for kind of pushing that project forward, in conjunction with New America. So we each, even though we don't have formal roles, we each play a role in the group, and it's kind of it's been a really nice way to draw on the expertise we each have, and then kind of highlight that expertise when it's possible. We have one person who does communications, so she's our editor. She'll edit anything that we give her. Does a great job with it. So that's the steering committee.
It's amazing because it's all volunteers. I mean, everyone,
Yes.
your point, like everyone has a day job for the
Yeah.
most. Yes.
Yes,
And
everyone in the group is doing this just out of the labor of love. It's not no one has, I think some of us, because we are data librarians, there's a little bit more space to be able to say this is also connected to what I do. My job is to help people find data and keep data available. So it's connected to the work that we do, but it is, none of us are working for pay to do this work.
incredible.
A democracy aside in the steering committee, how have you personally shaped the DRP strategy?
I think so one of the things I would say it's not just me, but I would say has been very important for me, is making sure that any data we rescue is in the public, available to the public as soon as possible. I've not wanted anything to be kind of hidden behind, hidden away on a server or inaccessible to people. So the goal is to make sure that we're making that data as accessible as possible, as soon as possible. And that has been where Data Lumos, which I can talk about later, has been a great tool for us to be able to do that. So for me, that's really a key element. I think I did a lot of the social media work at the beginning. And I think making sure that it's really hard to do when you're when the world is happening so fast and some things are so depressing, but I wanted to keep like a upbeat tone for the data rescue process, especially in our blue sky. Keep an upbeat beat tone and engage people as much as possible. So we had a lot of people, especially early on, asking us kind of reference questions, which is really fantastic. So they would ask us, well, where is this data gone? Or what do I use instead of this data? And so the blue sky became kind of a librarian. And it's like,
Reference librarian almost.
yeah, the
Yeah,
kind of like
yeah,
character almost
yeah.
in itself, which I found really cool. And I think, that was I found it to be partly cathartic for me to be able to have that. I'm a very much a people person, and so to have that people interaction was helpful. But it was cool to see that the interactions we've had and keeping it in a consistent tone, I think has been a helpful thing. It's also, I don't know how many people have said the thank you and like it's obvious that people really do care about, well, there are people who do care about public data and we're just happy that somebody's there to help them or talk to them about what's going on, and see that somebody's concerned about it.
That's
And
great.
like the people, like if for those that are involved, you mentioned that before the show when we were chatting that you have 900 plus volunteers helping
Yeah.
helping with the project. So can you speak to the volunteer program and how these people arrive at your doorstep or Data Rescue's doorstep wanting to help?
Yeah, I mean, so we have 900 people, over 900 people signed up. Not everybody necessarily can commit to helping out. And there's probably the core people who do the data rescues. There's probably about 200 who are really like core, who we see every day in our community. We have a communication channel called Mattermost that like is like Slack, and so we see about 200 people every day, or in there interacting. But I think the rest really, some people have come to me and said, I can't, either I don't have the tech abilities to do what you're doing, or I don't feel comfortable, or I don't have the time, or whatever, but what could I do? And we always say, raise awareness. That's still volunteering. If you're out there raising awareness, if you're talking to your family members about what's going on, if you're sharing things on Blue Sky, or if you're sharing articles to people, if you're writing your representatives, all of those things still matter. And in some ways, those things matter just as much as the work we're doing with rescues, because we need to raise awareness of the importance of public data. So it's been varying levels of engagement, from the super engaged, the people who've done 45, 50 data sets themselves, and to people who are more, the audience, but who are an engaged audience, who are helping us spread the word and raise awareness. And then we have others, people who come in for specific projects. So we have a lot of universities have done data rescue events themselves, so they've had the capacity to put on a data rescue event, and we've seen those at Washington University, especially, has been a big player with that. Cornell has done one. Georgetown, the Massive Data Institute at Georgetown just did one. So certain universities have been able to kind of to go the extra mile and do a data rescue event. We've had other groups. So our new campaign, one of our new campaigns is Save Our Signs, which is about the National Park Service signs that have been ordered to be, well, there's now a sign. If you go to a national park, there is a sign that will tell you to report any displays that are un-American or have negative depictions of America. And as a historian, that's has so many problems to me. But I think one of the things that did happen in the past decade was that there was a reckoning with signs and the need to be able to tell the real history, of the full history of the United States. And so what we're doing right now is trying to encourage people to go out and take pictures of those signs before they're taken down. So using the tactics, using the the approach of the administration to do something more positive, which is to document this history. And we've gotten hundreds of pictures. I think we're up to probably 1,000 pictures
That's
since
fabulous.
July 4th. So yeah, and that again, that's, these are people who would already be going to who are already going to the national parks, and they just send in their signs, and that's volunteering. That's a way to give back and contribute to the community. And if you want to go even further with that, sharing that on Blue Sky, sharing that on Instagram, letting people know about Save Our Signs, letting people know about Data Rescue Project. That's the way you can. This is really about getting the information out there, not just rescuing data.
Yeah, that's great. As a sort of ambassador of the Data Rescue Project, out of all those rich interactions, what has been I guess, your proudest moment of that?
Proudest moment. I think, well, I wouldn't call it a moment, but the thing that's giving me so much, a lot of joy, is the number of people I've been able to meet in all different kinds of sectors. So, we're not just talking to librarians. We have, originally in the New Yorker article, there was the data hoarder community who were very open to what we were doing and were very supportive of what we were doing. But even being in conversations with people who are um, in advocacy organizations that we wouldn't normally even talk to. So, we have connections with groups like, obviously, groups like the Association of Public Data Users, but through that, we've met people from New America, which is one of our, they helped us create the Data Rescue Project portal. We have connections with the Leadership Conference, like all of these different groups coming together that we wouldn't have had any reason to come together, and awareness of kind of the importance of data librarianship, awareness of librarianship in general. I think it has been, that's given me most joy. So it's not a moment, but it's this kind of the trend we have had in this past few months, this coming together of different people and groups across professions and across sectors, has been really meaningful to me.
What's the balance to that point between public and private and our involvement?
It's a great question. So in terms of public and private, I mean, there's I would say out of our group, we're probably 80 to 90% librarians, to be honest, within our group. But we do have a lot of researchers who work with us, and technicians. I mean, people who really are they have a technical background. They may not even be in academia. They may be working in private industry. Um, but it's not just about us, right? It's about this whole group. And so across the entire sector of who's interested in helping save the federal statistical system, that's where you see the broader kind of outlines. And it's something that I find fascinating and also study, is this how groups have to come together and network in these ways to solve difficult problems, right? Be it, in my studies, it's looking at mass atrocities, but in this case, it's about this how do we save the federal statistical system? And so it's hard to say outside of our group what that percentage would be, or what that would look like. But within our group, I can say it's mostly librarians for our group.
Fascinating. Yeah, one thing that stood out to me about Data Rescue is the tracker. It really, really impressive. I'm not going to liken it to the Domino's pizza tracker, but which actually is a very cool technology in and of itself, or way to track data. But really, can you explain a little bit more about the tracker, its purpose, and what it's about?
Yeah, so the data rescue. So one of the challenges we had in 2017 was there were some data rescue events where we don't really know where the data went. So there was a challenge of we didn't want the data end up in places where people couldn't access it, or we just didn't even know where it was. And so with the tracker, it was meant to try to deal with that problem. And what it is it's a tracker of rescues, not of necessarily of data sets. And so because you might have multiple, you might have duplicates of the same data set across rescues. And so like we have tracked 4 different access points for the Educational Resource Information Center. So it's gone 4 different places. But you can go in and you can see that there are 4 different places to go for that data. So it's really about trying to make sure that our goal was originally to have a one-stop shop for access to the rescues and the backup locations. So if you go in to look at it, you can find the name of the data set, where it came from, the data it was downloaded, and some information about the data set, and then a link to the backup location. So it's a one-stop shop for all of those pieces of information. And it's been great because we have been able to get data from public environmental data partners, from a group that we work with called Safeguarding Research and Culture that does primarily the large projects. They do a lot of large scrapes. We've gotten data from individual people who were just doing it on their own and submitting things, which was great. And they just were making it public in Internet Archive or Dataverse or wherever they were wanting to do that. We've gotten some from nonprofit organizations. Some can't be named, so they're listed as anonymous or under a pseudonym. But you can go in and get access to their data in various ways. So yeah, it's meant to be a place, a portal. And now we've gone from the tracker. The data rescue tracker was the starting point. So we now have a dashboard for that called the Data Rescue Project Portal. And the portal, you can do some searching, and we categorize the data sets so you can look at the different categories, or look at for data by categories. And we're updating that. I think last time I looked, it was up to 1,200 data rescues within the portal.
And that portal is like a catalog.
Yeah, it's a catalog. Yeah, it's a catalog of data rescues, definitely. But it's we always welcome if you have data that you've rescued. If you know of data that's not in the portal, let us know, and we're happy to take more submissions for that.
That's great. I think for it's interesting that since it has launched the portal, have you shifted focus, or has the group or data rescue shifted focus in how you're coordinating and discovering data sets, like from where you started to where it landed once?
Yeah, the pace has gone down, I think, is one thing, because definitely things were much busier in February and March when the news was it seemed like it was a constant daily barrage of things that were happening. Over time, we were able to develop a nomination tool. So we have that now, where people can nominate data sets if they're concerned about them. We are still rescuing. We are still working on data sets. The ones that we are working on this point don't. There are more concerns about whether or not they will be available for the long term, rather than whether or not they're going to go down tomorrow. So that's one big change, is we're not seeing as many of the, okay, all hands on deck, we got to do this tonight because the contract's ending tomorrow. It's more, okay, we need to do this because we know that the BLS staffing has been gutted by retirements, and we are concerned about the integrity of the data that they have on their website. So let's make a backup of it somewhere, and make it available through Data Lumos. That's been kind of the shift, is a little bit. So it's not an immediate need as much as it is that we want to ensure that there's some kind of access over the long term, and that working with Data Lumos has been an ISPSR, which is one of the oldest data archives in the country. They created a tool called Data Lumos, which it's for crowdsourced public data. And we've been using that to make our data available almost immediately, as immediately as we can.
And our understanding is, I guess, over 1,100 public data sets were rescued from 80 government offices. How do you prioritize that with this, I guess, sort of wisdom of the crowd participation?
Mhm.
How does that work?
Yeah, a lot of the prioritization is based on that time. So if we have a time frame of when things are going to be taken down for whatever reason, the most recent one that was like that was climate.gov, where there was a date announced for when it would be ended, and um, so we were able to get all of the data sets. There were people who worked on scraping the website itself and making that back up, but then we wanted the individual data sets, and to make sure that they ended up in Data Lumos. And the reason why that matters is that, web scraping can get data sets links potentially, but they may not always get all of the links together in context. And so we want to be able to do that from a data librarian's perspective. You really need to have the data file, the data documentation, the metadata, the context, as a package, and putting that into Data Lumos, which is a data archive that is built for data, ensures longevity, ensures long-term preservation in a way that web scraping can't necessarily. And so we do both. We have somebody scrape it, and then we will capture the individual web data sets. So when it comes to prioritization, it really is about what's the time frame we're looking at. Um, uh, for us, it was also what do we care more about? So in the early days, it was, Department of Education and IMLS, like I said. So we really wanted to make sure that nobody else was that we knew of was looking at that data, and we wanted to make sure that it was being rescued. There's also the element of who else is doing it. So if PEDP is covering something, we will let them cover it because they have their own volunteers and workflows. And so if it's environmental, or yeah, if it's environmental justice data, then we kind of defer to them. And the nice thing is we're in each other's communication channels, so we can always go over and ask them, are you working on this particular data set? If not, we can work on it, or we can help you with it. But I think that's been the nice thing about this, is that divide and conquer. I hate that kind of language, but taking some kind of division of labor approach to doing this, that we're not doing it all, we're doing it together.
That's
It's been
what's so
good.
amazing. And I think a really great way to define knowledge commons as well is it's the collaborative effort and the idea of bringing together different expertise.
Mhm.
That one person can't do it all. And so
Yeah.
relying heavily on subject matter expertise, domain experts, and that speak to the divide and conquer. It's acknowledging that when you're out of um, your comfort zone or your area of
Mhm.
expertise is really critical here. And so, like, I do have a side question about Data Lumos. Is it sponsored specifically by University of Michigan?
So it's sponsored by by ICPSR, which is part of University of
University,
Michigan.
okay,
Yeah, but ICPSR is a consortium of universities. It's a very large consortium of universities, and that's how it's primarily funded. Yeah, but it is connected to the University of Michigan. Anybody who works there is a University of Michigan employee.
got it.
Mm.
It's really fascinating. So you use this primarily for hosting because we're interested also, like, how do you deal with hosting and storage and all of the complexities that come with this?
Yeah, so when we got this off the ground, that was a part of it, that we, like I said, I didn't want it to be, I didn't want the data to be hidden. I wanted it to be immediately as possible available. And so Data Lumos, it was they didn't have this in 2017, right? That's one thing to think about. It was created in 2017. So it's been a real godsend for us. It's been something that we relied so much on, to be able to make the data available, and with their permission. I mean, I had a conversation after work one day with the director of ICPSR to say, okay, can we do this? Are you okay? We'll try to primarily put data that's within your purview, within your domain. But if we don't, like, if we put other things, is that okay? And she was like, do what you need to do. it's really for crowdsourced public data. So we'll help you as much as we can on the back end. And they are going through, they're going. A lot of data has been put in there. Data, just give you an idea, Data Lumos from 2017 when it was created to 2025, January 2025, had about 100 data sets in it. And from February 2025 to now is about 700 data sets in it.
Wow.
So the growth has been quite a bit, and it's and the usage is there. We're seeing people download the data sets, which is a little bit different from last time. What they're doing with it, we don't know, but we're seeing people use these data sets. So it's, without that tool, it would have been a lot harder for us to be able to do the work we are doing, and we're very thankful to ICPSR for that. But we also do have data sets that we have on our own storage, because there are some that are much bigger than what ICPSR can take. And so we have some data that we've gotten. For one is the census FTP data. We have that in different places, but on different storage areas. And one of the things we're doing right now is trying to fundraise to be able to get access to a large enough storage that we can merge it and deduplicate, and then deploy that data to someone else. Our goal is not to keep, we're not a data archive. We're not here to keep the data. We just want to be able to rescue it, work with it, deduplicate it, all of those things, and then send it on to its final home. Because we're not going to have a preservation mission like a data archive will. So there is some data that we have, excuse me, about 7 terabytes, I think, or might be more at this point, that we have that is on our own infrastructure.
It almost sounds like you're the first responders to this data rescue. That's what I imagine now.
I mean, that's what I think. In some ways, it's akin to a humanitarian organization.
Yeah.
That's why we use the lifesaver as our symbol. Is really, that we're trying to think through how, not only is trying to save the data, but also thinking through how other people can do rapid response like this.
Yeah. Do you have like one particular rescue that's most notable to you?
I think the one that was most exciting for me was so the USAID's demographic and health survey was the office was closed, as many of the other offices with USAID, and that data is primarily available through an application process. So it's a restricted access data set that you would get as a researcher if you apply for access. But they had the indicators available through an API. And we had a research volunteer work on, I don't think with us, I think they did it independently, work on trying to get the indicators out of the API, but it kept stalling on them and they weren't able to get it all out. One of our volunteers decided to take that on and got all of the data out of all of the indicators using the API. And so we have a post on our website for that. And that's particularly one that I was very proud of because it was so little of USAID is left, that it's a huge hole. And I was really disheartened by the fact that was just taken down so preemptively, or it was just, it really
it was
terrible.
really abrupt. And yeah, and so keeping pace with the speed of those takedowns must have been harrowing in some.
Yeah, well, that one took us by, so that was the one that really got the data rescue project started, I think, was just being taken by surprise, and not by USAID, and not wanting to be taken by surprise again like that. So I'm really proud of that one. I think that's a fantastic thing that this is Frank Donnelly, is the volunteer who did that. The other one is Erica, which is a reconstruction of parts of ERIC, which is the Education Resource Information Center from the Department of Education. It is now being continued, it seems, and then there's a company that has said that they would continue making it freely available. But at the time when we created it, it wasn't clear that it was going to be continued at all. And that's still a little bit up in the air because it is Department of Education tool. So one of our volunteers created an interface where it's linking into Internet Archive, but it makes it a more was able to make the Internet Archive files a little more usable, and using the numbering system that Eric has, which a lot of people who use that know about that numbering system, and so you can search by that number for the different files, or the different pieces of literature. So that was another one where, this person wanted to do this themselves and they had the time and ability to do that. But we wanted to try and support them as much as possible. And so we were able to, we try to help them and then amplify the effort that they put into that. And it was really nice to see, definitely a group effort. And it was nice to see that collaborative spirit around that.
I bet.
I have to ask because just going into the idea of what role librarians do play in this, because within, at least I can speak to the corporate or enterprise world, librarians are in higher demand just because of the specific skill sets. And you've spoken about librarians being ambassadors for public data. Can you share how the librarian's role is evolving, especially data rescue?
I think there's lots of ways that librarians' roles are evolving. Certainly, in my role as data librarianship period has been one of those that's evolved just over the time that I've been in the career. And it, while it wasn't a new thing when I started, it's definitely become, I think, a newer. It gained more widespread acceptance. So you see more schools with data librarians than you did back in the 2000s. So I think the our field has had to change significantly over time in very many ways, not just related to this. In terms of the data rescue project, I think um, it's been really fascinating because when we get in the news, I've seen people say, "Well, of course the librarians would do this. Of course they would be the ones on the." But then at other times I have people who are like, "Your librarians still exist," it's as if we don't matter anymore. So I think maybe if anything, this is going to help heighten our awareness of the fact that librarians exist and that we have a role to play beyond just pointing people beyond just information discovery. We're there as advocates for access to information. Uh, our slogan, one of the slogans we've used is public data is a public good. And that is something that we firmly believe that the federal government has a role, and any government has a role to play when it comes to providing public data. But we will continue to preserve that access, even if the government does not see that it has a role to play in that. That's just who we are, and what we will do is to preserve access to information. So I don't know. I don't know if it's changing because of the DRP any, but I think we've gained awareness, or there's more widespread awareness in the data community, I think, of the role that data librarians can play.
Yeah, and I think it's important. This is my own personal slant on it. It's very important for, as a service-oriented approach for information and knowledge, and especially in the age of AI, which we can't ignore. Reliable and truthful networks of information is very important, is critical right now.
Yeah, and that's the other thing with the way we've been promoting is that in a democracy, you need to have an informed electorate. It's fundamental to a democracy to have an informed electorate. And so having access to information is how you have an informed electorate. So our role, librarians are going to be the in the front line for supporting and maintaining that access.
I think that's like a very beautiful mission in general.
Mhm.
And bringing those same values out into the common space. I think it's something that is important, at least fundamentally for being able to
Mhm.
support. We see a lot of misinformation and disinformation these days
Mhm.
proliferating throughout networks and the internet. So if what are some lessons that have come out of sort of the idea of safeguarding research and culture project and your relationship with organizations abroad? Because this is not just reserved as a US effort, and you had mentioned Sucho before, which was
Mhm.
a project, is that being sort of part of the fundamental founding of the data rescue project. So interoperating with outside of the US, how have you seen that as important to data rescue?
Oh, it's been critically. I mean, it's certainly not only in terms of the global aspect, but also, as we mentioned, the expertise differences. And so, safeguarding research and culture is a good example. They are the primary lead is based in Germany, and many of their members are non-U.S. They also have different skill set, different approach to what they're doing than we do, and which has been great because it's been very complementary. But it also raises that question that this is the or brings attention to the challenge that American data is not just used by the United States, not just used by Americans. That give you an example, the demographic and health surveys from the USAID was used. Data from that was used to help create the Sustainable Development Goal indicators for, in one case, for I think 80 or a certain percentage, I think it was 80 to 90% of the sub-Saharan African indicators came from the USAID demographic and health surveys. So that's a huge uh, problem for the United Nations to be able to provide those indicators for a very critical region when it comes to SDGs. Um, so and that's just one example, and we have tons of these examples where other groups, we've had people get in touch with us um, from all kinds of industries. We had a hedge fund recently talking to us about the fact that they were from France, very concerned about what was happening in America with economic data, and as well as others who rely on what we do and what we've created. Um, and I will say this is not just what we've done and what we've created over the past 10 years. It's what we've done and created over the past 50 years. I mean, these many of these surveys are long running. The USA DHS has been going since, I think, 1982 or 1983. I mean, it's a very long running program. And to just dismantle them so quickly is disrupting to the rest of the world and not just the United States. So working with Sucho, working with especially with safeguarding research and culture, and then we also have had other partners reach out to us from France and Germany, especially, and then other countries, um, uh, because of their concern about this data.
Linda, curious about the data set is rescued, and that's one half of the equation. But the other half is
Mhm.
that, often the data set may get rescued, but the person that's involved in the curation of it, the subject matter expert, may no longer be around. So how do you maintain continuity? It's not maybe not something you can necessarily do yourself, but what does that look like? How does a data set continue to live after it's been
Yeah.
rescued?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and this is I think the big challenge area for all the community. It's not just I think I'm pretty comfortable that the data itself will be well managed in the way we've been making them available, so in the way we're backing them up. The other question though is if that data collection is no longer happening, right? And that's a much larger challenge than just data rescue project. So when it comes to the backup, I mean, I think working with an organization like ICPSR that has the role of data preservation, we know that it will exist for the long term, but it will become dated unless there's some kind of updates to it. So one of the conversations we've been having is how do we update the data? Is there a way to even do that? what would that look like? And unfortunately, that's not an area that we currently have had the time to be able to do much with yet. I would like to, but it's just that things have been happening so rapidly. It's hard to work on that. I think ICPSR has, for some data sets, will have the ability to keep updating if things are released, but they can't for everything that we've put in there. I think that's going to be the challenge. But the bigger question a lot of people are looking at, and there's a group called America's Essential Data / Data Index that is looking at that data collection piece. And the way they're trying to handle it is to isolate the data that's been programs that have been stopped that are congressionally mandated to try and bring the case to say that these need to be continued by law, need to be continued. So that's been a really really good program to see coming out. Hopefully they'll be able to make an impact to try and continue some of the data collection. And they've been doing a lot of outreach and talking to the media, as well as like last week did a webinar about the American Time Use Survey and the importance of the American Time Use Survey and why people use it, and why it should be continued as a survey. So I think more efforts for kind of raising awareness about why we do these things, and why we should continue to do these data collections, I think is a critical area going forward.
What do you see as ongoing challenges or emerging or new threats to long-term efforts? And, how do you prioritize accordingly? Like, I would imagine that you have to pivot and shift
Mhm.
pretty dynamically.
Yeah, and the thing is that the data, people came into this thinking that it was just about data being taken down off of the internet, and that has not been the primary concern. The primary concern has been the dismantling of agencies or the non-renewal contracts. Those are the things where we're seeing, as you said before, the data expertise is no longer there, or the commitment to making it available is no longer there. And those are the things that I find a little bit more challenging to work with, because we don't know what's happening. We just have no idea. Sometimes we're given a little bit of inside information, but or maybe a date, but for the most part we don't know what the outcome is going to be. And so um for us, we were trying to do preemptive data rescues, trying to go after things we thought would be potentially targeted by the administration, and used Project 2025 as our own roadmap to be able to see what was going to be targeted by the administration. And that helped us kind of give us some idea of what to do. But we've also responded to the community. If we've gotten like I said, on the Blue Sky, we've gotten lots of people come to us and say, "Oh, I know this is going down," or "I saw this report about this particular thing going down," or "They just fired everybody in this office. Can you help?" And then we've been able to kind of prioritize that way.
That's incredible. And that's brilliant as well, to use the Project 2025 as like the, reverse engineer that for a roadmap.
Whoever created the tracker, the Project 2025 tracker, I thank you. That was a very helpful thing.
Collaboration.
Yeah, I don't know
Um,
who that one was, but
no. And so if people are interested in getting involved or learning more about data rescue, where can we find you? And where can we
we
find the
are.
project?
Yeah, so we're datarescueproject.org. It's very easy. So feel free to go to us there. And we have a Blue Sky account. So it's datarescueproject.org as well. If you're interested in Save Our Signs, that's saveoursigns.org. So all very easy to navigate to. And we're happy to, if you have questions, our email is on the website. So you're welcome to email us if you have questions, or you're interested in getting involved.
And so are there specific skills that you guys have prioritized or that you're in need for, technical skills? subject matter
Um,
skills?
I think, we have a lot of people with a lot of great skills, and so you don't really need to have specific skills, but what we really need is people to raise awareness. There are definitely data sets that we can still, if you're interested, we could always use people to rescue a few more data sets. And there are some that they're still outstanding, but also just raising awareness and letting people know about this. This is happening, that we're losing our nation's heritage through losing this public data. I think that is just as helpful, and I would encourage people to do that. One of the things we were thinking, you know, you can post, if you're interested in the Save Our Signs project, you can post your signs and then on Blue Sky or Instagram, and then tag your representative, right? um, um, Make sure that they know what's going on. And that's local leaders as well. This is not just about national level politics, but also your local leaders. We are going to states should be concerned, state leaders should be concerned about the loss of this data for their own planning of services and future, the things that they're trying to work on. So raising that kind of awareness, I think, is just as helpful as doing a data rescue.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Lynda, for sharing everything you have. I know it's been tremendously valuable for our listeners, for ourselves, actually, and we really appreciate the time that you've given to us. So thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you for having me. This is great to talk with you.
Once we publish the episode, because this is live, we'll include all the links for our listeners so that everyone can find the data rescue. And again, it's not reserved just in the United States, but globally. So we really, really thank you for sharing your information, knowledge, and experience.
Thank you very much. It was great to talk with you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Do I just exit?
Yeah.
Okay.